In this video, let's paint the spear of the Saurus Warrior Alpha today. Hi there, Chris here with another fresh tip for you all. In this video, we are going to continue our work on the Saurus Warrior Alpha from the new Seraphon army. This model has been really fun to paint, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. And so in this video, we are going to work on that spear. To get things started, we are going to use Lead Belcher and some Kroxigor Scale Citadel Contrast. We've done this technique for all the metal bits to some degree on other areas of the model, and we're going to continue to do that so that everything kind of matches and lines up. Really, this is kind of one of those areas where, you know, I harp on about consistency and how you gather paint. And when you are consistent, you can get consistent results. And ultimately, when you are painting and you want to become more proficient in your painting, that is one of the key aspects to master as you move forward in this hobby. It's one of those areas that I highly recommend that you put more effort into, as again, it pays off in the long run when you become more accustomed to it. Iron Breaker is next. We're going to use some Kroxigor scales. Now, this is going to be a sort of a mixture of 2 to 1. I want more metal than contrast paint. So you can see there on the brush, it was like about halfway up the bristles, but the Iron Breaker was a little bit more. So there's more silver in this mixture. That way that this highlight as we apply it, and we're applying it again in a similar fashion what we've done on other areas of the shield, where we're kind of going for this almost non-metallic metal effect using metallics. So it kind of gives you best of both worlds kind of thing when you apply this particular technique for these kinds of areas. You can see there how it is a little bit different, a little bit brighter, but it's still the same hue as the rest of the metals and on the shield. And I want this weapon to feel more like it's associated with the shield than it is the warrior himself, even though, same faction, same colors and everything like that. It's just on the warrior, it's a little more worn, it's not quite as pretty anymore versus the weapons. Maybe these are brand new weapons. Who knows? I mean, make up any reason really. But again, this is more one of those examples of, switching up colors, but playing within value and saturation of color. Iron Breaker with some Lamian Medium is next. We're just simply going to lay a little dollop down onto our palette and add a drop to thin out the color. Okay, 2 drops. And basically we're going to create a bit of a glaze with this, and we're just going to refine some of these edges and create a slight transition. So when you're glazing in these kind of highlights on top of what you previously did, always finish your brushstroke where you want more paint to gather and get brighter. So you'll see as I work my brush around these surfaces, bring in brightness down towards the lower portions of details. Again, guys, similar to what we do in non-metallic metal. And with the brighter metallic, again, with this slight glazing process that we're doing here, again, I'm just painting it on the lower portions of details of the metals, like what we did with the shield. And again, it's because we're glazing, we can control how intense and how bright that's going to get. We can bring that all the way back up to a Iron Breaker consistency and saturation on that surface. But I didn't really feel it was entirely necessary because, again, I knew where I was going with this particular color scheme, and I just didn't want to, there's color separation and stuff like that. Kroxigor Scales Contrast Medium. We're going to add about 3 drops of Contrast Medium and 1 somewhat healthy drop of Kroxigor Scales. Thorough mixture. And we're going to switch over to our more detailed brush here. And again, you can see we're going to just glaze in these transitions on the surface, kind of like what we did on the shield. Clean the brush off really fast. And if it's really heavy or pooling or anything like that, then I just simply wipe the brush off and feather out the color and bring back that little silver on some of those edges. I'm not too concerned about the color, tinting the brighter silver, that last glaze of Iron Breaker. I'm not too worried about changing that, as I do want the metal to have more of this Kroxigor Scales coloring. So again, it'll stay darker. Again, it's, because where we're going with this, and you'll see in a moment. Patience, people, patience. I do about 3 layers of glazing to really bring up the saturation with this thinned out mixture. And again, working with the contrast paints in this thinned out consistency, using mediums allows you a lot of control and how far you push these transitions. Next, we're going to use Kroxigor Scales all on its lonesome. Again, I'm using my same brush here. This is really, really minimal. and I'm just getting just the high points and corners of things, really just kind of bring a lot of darkness. Again, this is the similar thing what we did for the shield. So everybody who was paying attention to what we did on the shield, this is going to be fairly familiar for you. And everybody who's just tuning into this tutorial series, yeah, we cover quite a bit of ground and quite a bit of technique in these videos. So hopefully everybody does enjoy these. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Just, you know, just to help. just, you know, for your own edification, I guess. There, you're just demonstrating that we're painting both sides of the model so that a lot of you don't think I'm just painting one side of this thing. We're going to jump over to Necron Compound. We're going to grab a small dry brush and we are going to dry brush some little highlights. Now, I grab a pretty healthy amount of dry paint onto the brush, give it a thorough wiping. You can see there's barely any paint on that surface. And with a very light hand, we bring it across the surface. The brush stroke does matter, so I am bringing the brush stroke in a back to forward kind of motion to catch some of those edges. I also want it on the high points where it's dark, and I also want it on the low points where it's bright. Again, when you are doing kind of a non-metallic metal, especially in this kind of simplified form, it is really straightforward. Again, it gets brighter at the bottom, but it has that little edge highlight along even the darkest areas up on top. In fact, it's pretty similar to what we do with the gemstones and such. Oh, yeah, it's a great angle there. And again, you can see we're just simply bringing the brush, just catching just those edges. That's all we're looking for, is just to catch those edges. Any harder pressure or anything like that, that's when you get those little streaks and everything like that on the surface. If that's what you want, then by all means. Stegadon Scale Green is next. We're going to slap this onto the palette. I'm just going to grab just a generous amount of water in my bristles. Really, all I do is when I rinse the brush off, instead of wiping all the water off the bristles, I use just a little bit of the water in the dampness of the brush to thin the color out. Just a little bit, just to help with flow. We are going to apply 2 layers on this surface, just to get nice even coverage. I'm going with the Croxagore scales on this handle. I debated on what I wanted to do for this handle. I was going to go with a really dark color. I thought of even dark browns and everything like that. But I said, no, let's keep within the theme. So we're sticking with this, you know, kind of turquoise. I've thinned the color out with just a little bit of water. It's really just a thin glaze here, just to fill out, get into some of the little nooks and crannies in between fingers and things like that, just to get that base coat down and get it nice and smooth. Sotek Green is next. We're going to slap that onto the palette. Again, I'm going to stick with that same brush with just the dampness of the water in the bristles, not heavy with water. Halfway up the brush, work it into a chisel, and then now we are going to work this across the surface of that handle detail. Now, I find using the brush in this kind of chiseling fashion, we're basically making a chisel where we have a flat edge. And I find this very helpful, especially when you have these deep details on that surface and you really just want to concentrate on just the high points. It is kind of like what we do with dry brushing. Dry brushing, essentially, when you think about it, is like layering very, very lightly, but just the high points. But with this chisel brush technique, we simply just catch the high points, leaving the dark color in the recesses. I also left the lower half of that grip untouched, because we're going to come in with this deeper color here, Stegadon Scale Green. We're going to mix it into the Sotek Green just to create our shadowed highlight. So this is the underside. Now, again, I want that Stegadon Scale Green all on its lonesome to be inside the in-between of the details, the recesses, but I want this slightly lighter color to be a highlight. I also just to bring out some of that texture and everything like that, just so it doesn't feel like, you know, we just left it all alone. And, you know, I was considering using like a Nuln Oil or something to really kind of darken up that lower half, but I figured, no, we'll leave it like that. Sotek Green is next. We're going to use some Temple Guard Blue. We're going to give this a little mixture. Basically, this is going to be a 1-to-1 mixer ratio. Usually, again, when we are gathering the paint, how you gather it, as long as you're consistent, you can always get consistent results. I know I say that a lot in these videos. 2 drops of medium just to thin it out ever so slightly. We're not going for quite a glaze consistency, but it is quite thin, so it is treated like a glaze. And as you may or may not notice, as we work the paint on the surface, you can see I'm starting about 3/4 of the way up the detail and drawing my brush up towards the highest point on that detail, on the central spine. And this essentially is, you know, what we do with glazing. We just bring the brush where we want the color to gather as we finish the brush stroke. So you can see the brush stroke is running from the lower third and then running up to the central spine of the area. As we work with this layering, we are going to put down, I think it's about 2 or 3 little layers on the surface. And here you can see I'm just very, very deliberately depositing a little bit of paint on that highest point of the spine of the grip, as it were. It kind of looks like it's stone, so I'm not sure what the heck it's supposed to be. Skink Blue, Citadel Dry, small dry brush, too much paint on the brush there. You can see I wipe off quite a bit. And again, with a very, very light hand, we are going to draw this. And I'm drawing this from the forward portion and bringing the brush stroke back. But I'm also going to catch the side as well. I'm concentrating more color on the high point, but I'm also going to let some of the color get deposited on the side edges, and possibly even if it catches some of the bottom edge, that's fine as well, because it'll bring some of that texture forward. But otherwise, again, with dry brushing, it is key to keep a very, very light hand when you work your way around. If you feel the model moving in your hand, you are dry brushing too hard. Temple Guard Blue is next with some Lamian Medium. We're going to slap this down onto the palette, give it a drop or 2. I think it's just 1 drop. Yeah, it's just 1 drop. And with this, we are going to begin working on the spear tip. With this base coat, simply just very carefully work our way around. And initially I wasn't going to paint the interior of that channel that runs through the spear tip, where the little circles are. But then I decided, I'm just going to paint it anyway. I mean, it's all going to get painted, so why not? So after that base coat is done, we are going to continue on, and we're just going to make sure, we're going to catch some more of these details here. Some of the areas that are not shown, you can see like where the spear tip and the metal meet. I do have to film that or paint that off camera because it's kind of hard to get good angles. Temple Guard Blue, Baharoth Blue as well, in roughly a 1-to-1 mix ratio with some Lamian Medium just to help thin it down just a bit, just a drop. And we're going to give that a nice thorough mixing. And when I say a nice thorough mixing, we're talking about mixing that until we see no marbling, no lines or anything like that. Very carefully here, I'm just picking out these little central discs, dots, globes, I don't know what they are. We're going to concentrate more of the color in towards the central line on the spear tip. I'm going to go for kind of like the central lines, kind of like what you see with like Necrons, where there's this unknown power source in the material itself, whatever this is supposed to be. Use your imagination. It's some crazy star metal, sure, you know. White Scar, contrast medium. We could have just as easily used Liquitex Flow Aid like we had done in previous videos. I grabbed a drop, laid down 3 drops of contrast medium, and we're going to use this like contrast paints. I'm going to use a detail brush here, and very carefully we are going to lay that in to the linear detail, that channel that runs in the spear tip, and as well as around each of those little circular details. The reason for using contrast is so that it helps with flow. You can see as soon as I touch the model, you can see the capillary action immediately starts taking off, and the color just wants to fill in those areas. And that's why we're using the contrast medium. Again, we could have simply just used Liquitex Flow Aid in the paint to get a similar result, but I figured, yeah, we'll stay within the realm of Citadel paints for this example of painting as well. But again, there's many products that do this kind of stuff, and feel free to use whatever is in your area and is easy to get a hold of. But again, you can see this is the second application of that thinned out paint. I'm going to jump back to that previous mixture of the 50-50 of Temple Guard and Baharoth and re-clean up some of these edges and the little circular details in the spear. Again, the idea being that this spear tip is glowing with an energy, and this little rune line detail that is running through the spear tip, it is the source of the power, as it were. I don't know. I'm just making it up. Baharoth Blues next. Just lay it down on the palette. Thin it out ever so slightly, just with a little dampness of the brush. Again, we're sticking with our detail brush here, and we're just going to basically create an edge highlight around this detail. I'm not too worried about the orb-like details, as really if the white is the brightest point and is the source of the power, those little details actually just around their perimeter would be brighter, and in their center would actually get darker. So we're going to see an example of that once we get work our way through. I'm going to grab some white scar, or the remainder of it, and add it to the Baharoth blue. I'm going to add a drop of medium just to help thin it out, and not thin it out so much that obviously, you know, we got to glaze it 50 million times. I exaggerate, of course, but yeah, I think you all understand what I'm talking about here. And with this, we're just very carefully working our way around these details. And as I'll demonstrate in a few moments here, we are working on both sides simultaneously. And if you're working on a whole unit of these and you're going to do this, I would highly recommend you work from a wet palette so that the paint lasts a little bit longer as you work your way through the little assembly line process. Kroxigor Scales is next with some contrast medium, some help with contrast medium. We're going to throw 3 drops down onto the palette. We're going to grab about half a dollop of the contrast, thin it right down. Again, we're going to give it a nice thorough mixing till we see no lines, marbling, or anything like that in the color. And we're going to glaze in and create a slight transition, building out from the center and getting darker out towards the cutting edges of the spear. So whatever this material is imagined it is, the power is emanating from within and it's getting darker. So imagine it's some kind of crystal, maybe. I don't know. Like it's, again, we're making it up, right? We're making it up. We're going to use some more Kroxigor Scales all on its own. So we're going to use a detail brush and we're just going to catch just the high points and the leading edges of areas. We also use this and create a slight texture on some of the surface. So you can see here as I kind of just touch the brush to the surface and just let it fall just a little bit further into some of the areas that we're working. Again, just to create a slight variation of color and a little bit of depth. I do it 2 times, gives you that nice little outline around the spearhead. And again, that is the spear. The spear tip, the spear handle, and the grip itself are painted. And hopefully you guys have been enjoying this series. I think we got one more in us. We're going to finish the base and finish off some of these details. And I think we're going to do a little bit of fun. We're going to do some gemstones and everything like that. And so a huge thank you for everybody who's been watching, painting along, and enjoying themselves. A huge thank you to my patrons. Without your support, these videos would not be possible. And a huge thank you to everybody for their continued support and all you brand new ones as well. Huge thank yous. Take care of your brushes. They'll take care of you, and I will see you in the next episode.